In the last video, John and I got the bottom end of the motor back together. We put the pistons, the rods, all new bearings back in, and this part is all ready to go. But today, we have the head, which is completely disassembled, all these random parts sitting here, and about 2 huge boxes of all new parts, new seals, hoses, DOE hoses, head gasket, timing chain, a little bit of everything. So let's get to work. Off camera in the last week or so, I pulled out all the valves, the springs, seals, and everything. And we're currently getting the valves reseated and everything to make sure they're actually going to seal properly in the head, because John had noticed when we pulled these out, and these are all cleaned up now, but they definitely looked like some of them weren't seating properly. These are all cleaned up with a wire wheel. You can see the intake ones turned out really good. I'm pretty happy with that. And John has just spent some time relapping these, or lapping them, I guess, with some compound. And we've got this all cleaned up as well. So we're gonna take care of the exhaust side next. This is a valve lapping tool. Got this for like $8 at AutoZone. It has little suction cups on the ends. We're gonna use just a little bit of oil to keep this lubricated on here. This is our
very old valve lapping compound.
So this is just, it's kind of like a gritty substance, right? That will just help kind of smooth this out. So you can see the part where it seats is right on this lip right here. So that's where we want to make sure we're kind of dabbing this on, and
it doesn't have to be perfect all the way around. Once you start spinning it around, it'll all kind of find its home.
We'll stick this
Give
on.
it a good, yep, there you go. Say, so even then you can pick it up and rotate it 90. You don't have to take it all the way out.
Well, maybe I wanted to. So now it looks like that it's cleaned out some of that compound.
Did you hear the audio difference too? And how it doesn't sound as coarse?
It's a bit more smooth now, yeah.
It means you're getting a good seat on there, and the compound's doing its job.
And so at first it's kind of making a different noise, and then
it sounds more coarse.
Yeah, let's see, pay attention here. And it quiets down after a little bit. We're gonna wipe all the compound off. So that's what it looks like after. Here's the side that's also already done, and then this one right here hasn't been touched yet, so you can see the difference between those two. But
we have a nice uniform kind of dark gray surface on the valve there.
So that way we can make sure it seals nice and won't be leaking. All right, we got 7 more of these to do. While I'm working on the valves over here, John is beginning work on reassembling the timing guides and putting the timing chain on. And you were just saying that they do something special with the chain here?
Yeah, so the chains themselves actually have these links on them, so when you're assembling the motor, you can put it back together a lot easier. Make sure your timing's correct. On these 16 valves, there's a mark right here. You line your
Copper
link up, and you have your motor set to top dead center. These will align with marks on your camshaft gears, and your motor will be in time.
That's amazing how easy that is.
They tried to make it simple.
So they've got our 2 new timing guides as well. I know this one is very difficult to find. I was able to source just about the last one, I think, in North America, so sorry everyone. I think you can still find these in Europe. I can put the part number on the screen if you're interested. I'll also have a complete parts list in the description box.
These older ones actually have, it hugs the timing chain on the bottom, so the timing chain won't actually fall down at this point.
Oh wow, that's nice.
Yeah. They thought of everything on these old cars.
It's taken me forever to do these valves, but John is now making progress on this oil pump O-ring and seal, and look at this old one. It's just falling apart, so I'm glad I ordered this. I mean, it was also, you can tell, just super flat. So Oddly enough, it's actually an O-ring that goes in here that's just shaped that way as opposed to a seal like most of the other stuff.
This wasn't doing much sealing. Put it back together.
Old seal did well for 1,500 miles.
Was that all that was in there?
Oh yeah. Before getting back into the video, I want to take a moment to announce some new merchandise I have launched inspired by this rebuild and the 900. It simply says "Build It Better" with a sketch I had done of the 900, symbolizing that everything I'm doing on this car and everything hopefully you all are doing with your Saabs is to build it better. Make the car the best car that you can, whether it be restoring, repainting, upgrading, cleaning, things like that. These shirts are offered with both a light text and a dark text in a variety of colors depending on whether you choose a light text or dark text. So there are 2 listings. I also have some stickers available. Please support the channel. Check out the listing below. It'll be linked right at the top of the description. And let me know what you guys think. These are very comfortable, high quality t-shirts. I am loving mine so far, and I'm sure you'll be seeing me wear it in lots of future videos. We've got the head all cleaned out. We got it flipped over now. So all these washers have been pulled out. We used some compressed air to get it all clean. All the old valve stem seals are out. So we're using a 10 mil on an extension. And it's just the right size to get our new valve stem seals on. These couple were previously done in an older video, so we've got 16 of these to do. I went ahead and ordered 18 of these just to be safe because they're so cheap. We're beginning putting our valves and springs back in. First step is to lube this valve up with a little bit of oil. Look from under here, you can line it up pretty easily, slide it through. We can put our spring back in, and we take 2 of these. I want to get these to see. Oh, look at that. I just dropped that in there perfect.
Okay, you do it a second time.
There we go. Got both of those seated in there. Now, there was a trick we saw where you can apparently put a plastic bag over here and compress this with a socket. However, from what we're seeing, these springs are just too stiff for us to be able to do that successfully. So we're using a different method, but let's get to it. To explain what John is currently fiddling with a little bit better, you can see each valve has these rings in it, and these sit right on those rings like that right in there, and the ones we've already done. So getting them to seat in there properly can be a little bit difficult. That is 1 out of 16 done, so gotta do that 15 more times. It's definitely a bit time consuming. After quite a long time, lots of effort. There's the last one. All 16 of them. All back in, back together. Well, our next step, since John has this timing cover on, is put this rear main cover on. So in order to do that, we got to take it off the stand because both those covers need to be on before we can put the head back on. So I'm going to do that next, but in order to do that, we've got to bring out our hoist, and we have 4 old head bolts that I saved. So that way we can safely and evenly lift this block up. All right. Slide it up. There you go. Stand is free. Sweet. So John's got our new crank seal in there, and this is just some dust remover. It's just compressed air basically. And one thing we need to do, we've already taken care of it on the cylinder head, but we need to spray out all these coolant channels and all these coolant oil channels in here just to make sure they're free of debris, because there's definitely a ton of debris in there from when I cleaned this surface and just from us reinstalling everything. There's a bunch of crap in here we need to clean. One other thing I want to note is that all of these surfaces have been cleaned and everything when I painted the motors, or the motor and all the parts, like that's already been cleaned. So what John is doing now is just, as he's calling it, finger painting some gasket maker onto here. It seems like these gaskets are quite difficult to find, but it's okay to apparently just use gasket maker on here, so that's what we're doing. It's unlike the other one, which is so perfectly shaped to the side of the block. That one's all different and it's kind of confusing. We're getting ready to mount the transmission to the block now, and one thing we're doing right before that is putting our new slave cylinder on. So a lot of people recommend rebuilding these. I had already ordered a new one before I realized that, so we have a new one here. I'm gonna keep the old one and probably rebuild it anyways, just to have as a spare. But yeah, it's our next step.
Or for mine.
So there are some spots for this gasket here, according to the Bentley manual, that we need to make sure we apply a layer of gasket maker to help seal it. One of those spots is right here, and then on the other end down here, we'll place our gasket over top here. One last step here, very important step before we mate the block to the transmission, is the oil pickup tube. So we've got a new O-ring in for that, and it's just a couple of bolts right there on the crank. We can drop it down on here. So like you saw, I already put gasket maker down here. I'm also gonna put some gasket maker on this side though, to be safe. The Bentley manual only calls to put gasket maker on both ends, but I figure more gasket maker can't hurt. We've run into a bit of an issue here. So our plan was to mount the flywheel, clutch, and everything to the block, but John was inspecting these bolts. These are bolts I bought last year, and you can see they're stretching. So we don't want to put these two are stretched, the other 5 are fine. We don't want to put these back in and then have to deal with the possible repercussions of that, either right now when we go to torque it or down the road. So we're just gonna put the flywheel on with 5 bolts. I'm gonna have to order some more, and then we'll deal with the rest of the pressure plate and clutch and everything later once we get the special tool for it and the new bolts. And we are going to put just a little bit of thread locker on the bolts that are good, and then we'll add thread locker to the other ones once they come in.
There it is.
Man, that was hard.
Good thing you ate your Wheaties this morning.
A reading from the book of Saab here. They have all of the bolt lengths kind of lined out for you so you know, and they also tell you exactly which ones you have to add thread locker to here in the Bentley manual. So thankfully it went on nice and smooth. It's a bit easier when you don't have to worry about all this stuff, but again, that's a problem we'll deal with later. So let's get all these in and torqued down. With the transmission all tightened down, they say about 18 foot-pounds for all those bolts. One last thing we're doing, and I want to give my buddy Tyler a shout out. He's a big 900 guy here in Arizona. He recommended putting some gasket maker on these mating surfaces, specifically the oil return, just to make sure, because apparently this is a very common oil leak spot on these motors. So we're going to do that right now, and we'll put our new gasket in. And we'll drop the head on, or as John said earlier, we'll place the head on.
Toss it on there.
And then I'll show you guys also as well, we have our new head bolts. make sure you get new head bolts when doing this, but they have both the sequence for how you should tighten it and then also the stages. So we have to do it in 2 stages. Stage 1, we'll do all of them at that, and we'll do stage 2. She'll make some more power there because she's stage 2 now. And then an extra 90 degrees or quarter turn past the 59 foot-pounds.
So now when you're trying to fish the chain up, you can kind of one-hand it and get it through.
Interesting. Bring it down under this, like you were saying.
Yeah, you kind of loop it around and over.
Okay. Those exhaust ducts don't feel good in my leg.
So now tilt it up.
Oh, the other timing guy is getting popped there. Okay, there we go. On the one.
We're not on this bottom one.
Oh yeah, you're right. It's not seating flat.
So you want to dip these in oil too.
Okay.
When you go to torque something like this, give them a little dip.
Just so that way they're...
You're not fighting any sort of friction. It'll give you a false reading.
Okay. So I've got head bolts dipped in oil, like John just said.
Probably like this one, I think, was where the pin was at.
Should I just go down until it starts getting...
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Just so I can let this go and the head won't hit the floor. Yep. Yeah, let's go.
So we're ready to do our first run at 44 foot-pounds here. It would help if I set the torque wrench to 44 foot-pounds. So this is number 1. So we'll do 59 and then we'll do a quarter turn.
Yep. For one more bolt.
And our last step is going another quarter turn or 90 degrees. Oh yeah.
So usually I'll take it to and do like that.
There's 90 degrees.
A little more.
A little more.
A little more. That's good.
About there.
A little more. I said that's what, you go to this finger.
Okay. That's a good way to do that. Got our own little protractor here.
They make tools for this, or you can just find a friend. That's a head.
One thing we don't want to forget is to make sure to put these 2 bolts on right here that go to the head. So these were in our bag with all of our timing cover bolts, but we couldn't put them on until the head was on because they bolt into there. John said not to give him credit for this, but I'm going to anyways. We checked just to confirm the bottom end is still at top dead center. So we have our timing marks on the flywheel here, and there's our little guide, which if your car is all dirty and full of oil, I have no idea how you're supposed to see that. But we just confirmed that this was lined up and it's not too hard to spin at this point. So make sure you adjust that if you need to.
Mostly just the tops of the valves and the lifter wells.
Those are the 2 areas we're gonna drizzle some oil on now. Try not to do too much. The engine being at an angle like this, it's pretty hard to get stuff in there. One little test we were just running that John recommended is we knew pulling these out when we tested some of these lifters that a handful of them were bad. So thankfully I was able to source 8 new ones from a junkyard 900 here that are all good. But we want to make sure that we can still press these in. So what we were doing is kind of blowing air just with our mouths into this hole and then making sure that these inflate, and then we could push them back down. So these 8, which were all numbered when we pulled it apart, are all good. These 8 up here are a little bit less than desirable. So we're gonna replace those 8, and you can see they're all numbered. So it's time to install these back into the head.
this point, we can't add too much oil to it. Well,
Technically.
we could fill her up.
So just over the lifters?
Yeah, over top of the lifters. We'll make sure we get some on the journals as well.
And do I need to save any more at this point?
We'll do a little bit on the camshafts too. So that usually goes at about 1 to 2 o'clock. So we'll kind of rough it in right there. So there's a number on the top part. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, it says 2.
Yep.
So I got this one. Okay.
Now when we do this, remember this bolt head's
the-
actually black, and there's a banjo bolt. So your oil passages run all on the inside holes, with the exception of these 2 outer holes.
Okay.
So we need to make sure that the tab goes on the inside and the black bolt as well. When we do this, there's top dead center marks on the timing gears, both of them. They're in the same spot, camshaft gears. Most of your chains are nice enough to have timing marks on them. You see the copper links there. So on your intake side, you want to put your mark right in between your 2 intake. And that should sit in a notch on the camshaft. Just like that.
The other thing John mentioned is there's little cutouts on the actual camshafts too, and you said we position those at about what, 1 o'clock or so?
Yeah, it's about 1 o'clock, 1:30. And I believe on this one it's after. You can pull the bolt out, yeah. So you can, without the bolt,
Put
and
that
just,
on there.
yeah. Oh, okay. I was wrong. It goes in the middle.
It does?
See how that mark is in the middle of the link?
Uh-huh.
So, yeah. So that's good.
All right, I did it right.
Our tensioner with our new seals.
Here's the old one. This O-ring, which John said he thought was a washer. The sound it made when he dropped it on the table, it sounded like it was a washer. It was a
Hard plastic.
hard plastic, yeah.
And I've personally made this mistake before. These tensioners, you should be able to fully thread it all the way in by hand. If it gets tight at all, stop, take it out, check the threads. Sometimes it will bind up. If you just wiggle it, it'll keep moving. But you should be able to send it all the way home by hand. I've broken one off in the head before. It was a nightmare.
As we're getting ready to properly time the engine, John's getting the crank pulley on, and I wanted to show you guys the old crank pulley. You can see that rubber that's in there was just completely destroyed on both sides. So he's got the new one on there right now. You see the new one. Good rubber.
That'll do, donkey. Maybe. And when we start spinning, you'll hear the tensioner start ratcheting.
Oh, yep. I
So
heard
don't
all
worry
right.
about that. So keep going.
It's cool to hear the tensioner.
So keep going. You can start slowing down a little bit. You're almost there. Like, look, a little more. A little more. A little more. A little more. Keep going. Just at that pace. All right. Stop there. So some people get a little discrepant just because this is set to 0. Doesn't necessarily mean you're top to the center of cylinder 1. We're at 0. But if we look on our camshafts, our marks are nowhere to be found. So all that means is we're at bottom dead center on cylinder 1 and cylinder 4.
Okay.
So we'll spin it another revolution. Cylinder 1 and 4 will finish the stroke, be at the top. We'll check our timing there.
So do another 180 degrees basically.
360.
Okay, so it's a little bit past
Yeah.
0.
Yep.
And here we've got our 2 markers up. Okay. Interesting. And then these. So now we don't care about where the copper gears
Correct.
are.
Yeah. That's only good for setting it up.
Okay. So we want to make sure these are all lined up, and then this is at 0
So
degrees.
these should be at about noon.
Like John said, just about noon. So right at the top, in other words.
Something to note too, I think we were talking about, is once you spin it one time, your timing guides on the chain will not line up.
The copper pieces, in other words.
They will spin around. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio. If you do spin it around and they don't line back up, don't worry. Those, at this point, are no longer important.
And you can see that we're pretty close there as well. So
We overshot it a little bit, but our marks here still line up. So I can confidently say we got it.
So we'll torque the crankshaft, 2 camshaft bolts, and then also the tensioner. Get those all tightened down and move on. So John has our very legitimate
Porsche time.
Yeah, shout out to my old roommate Cameron for letting me have that. 140 foot-pounds. All right, that wasn't too
bad at all. We struggled a lot more last time.
Easy. So John's got a wrench on the other end to hold it still while I tighten this down. Ready? Next, we're gonna start putting on our new manifold. So John is gonna be handling the exhaust side of things. We also have a new stud kit. So we'll replace all this hardware with some nice shiny new hardware. And while he's doing that, I'm gonna put the new intake manifold and intake manifold gasket on. Intake manifold is on, and this thing is really starting to come together and looks great. The time lapse I realized stopped filming because my phone overheated, but John had a tremendous victory over here on his end. His last exhaust stud he was putting in snapped on him right inside the head, and look at that, he was able to fish it out.
Tightened it till it was loose.
Great work. It happens. That looks great with that new hardware on there too. Look at that. All that zinc plated stuff. It's starting to come together more and more. So right now we're reinstalling the turbo, and we have a new flange right here ready for it.
Okay, you can go. Done.
Sweet.
You don't need pressure, do you?
We're at the point now where we're starting to break into some of the fun parts. That includes the DO88 full coolant hose kit, their throttle body hoses that we had left over from when we did all the intake hoses, as you might remember. And we're putting on one of our coolant pipes. So one of the DO88 hoses will go off of this end, and then we have our elbow that's gonna sit on right here. And the throttle body hose, which John has already placed on right here. And with the magic of some video editing, we're gonna go ahead and get the rest of these DO88 hoses all put on and replaced, as well as some other little parts, and get back to it. It's been quite a bit of time, but we've gotten a few of the DO88 hoses in. All the accessories are on back here. We have not yet done the belts. We'll do that once it's in the car. But this is super exciting to see how all of this has come together. So in the next video, we will be putting it in the car, doing the rest of this, including putting the valve cover on, valve cover gasket. Really the only thing we have left here, I mean, you saw how much was here at the start of the video. We have the distributor, the starter, a couple little brackets, and that's about it. Most of the stuff has been all cleaned up. So that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to John, as always, for his amazing help. I'll see you next time.
Take it easy.